All right, welcome everybody to Satoshi Chats episode 8. My name is Jack,
And my name is Casey.
and today is a very special day because it's the 1st of January 2021. Quick little price update. Actually, Casey, what did you do for New Year's this year?
Not much, honestly. I just stayed in, hung out with the girlfriend. Actually made a nice steak dinner, of course. Gotta have that steak.
Well, what else would you have for dinner?
Yes.
I actually did something quite interesting that not a lot of people could say they did. I work in a ski town, so I had the privilege. They have a tradition where about like 9 o'clock, employees or friends of employees could go up the chair, and they all get handed torches, and then they shut off the lights, and we all go down the mountain with torches, and it's pretty cool.
Ooh.
It's pretty cool. Good
So you got to participate in that?
Yeah, so like I got to light a torch and like go down the mountain. It's pretty cool.
That's pretty dope, actually. I've actually seen that in Utah.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of people do it.
Yeah.
But anyway, the price update.
Yes, Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is currently $29,313.
Oh, juicy.
Doesn't really matter.
Yes, indeed. The rest don't matter at all. So, got interesting topic today, and it's kind of a general topic, but it's the inevitability of hyperbitcoinization. And so,
yeah,
just
where do we
essentially,
even start?
right. So I think first let's start with like saying what hyperbitcoinization means, and it's basically like let's define it first as the transition of like a reserve currency denoted in dollars to one in Bitcoin, right? I think that's like the benchmark for hyperbitcoinization, right?
Yeah, definitely. The Bitcoin standard, the classic.
Right, and just simply like Michael Saylor, he says his company wasn't just buying like an asset, right? He says his company is deliberately adopting a Bitcoin standard. And they're basically just saying that they're going to denote all their value in Bitcoin now because everything else is worthless, right? So that's like what the standard of hyper-Bitcoinization is. It's when you basically put all your assets into it and start valuing everything in that.
Yeah, it's when it's fun as Bitcoiners today to poke fun at valuing things in Bitcoin, but at one point it actually is going to come into fruition where we do value things in Bitcoin.
Right, and I think it'll be a short transition period, right? Like I don't think it's going to be like this long. I mean, maybe I could be wrong, but I personally don't think it would be a super long, drawn-out process simply because, like, as soon as people understand, like, what Bitcoin is all about and what it can do, they're just going to want to jump on the train.
Adoption. Yeah, it's literally just adoption. Something that I immediately thought of was slowly, then rapidly, or whatever the saying is.
Yeah, slowly at first or whatever.
You could kind of have a similar comparison to the internet. Like internet users go up significantly more and more each year. So it's at first it's 2%, then the next year it's 4%, then the next year it's 8%. So I kind of like to think about it as that one little not game, but it's like a thing that people ask each other. They're like, hey, would you rather have $1 million or double a penny for a whole month? And some people usually say, oh, I'll have $1 million, but then when they double a penny for a month or two or whatever, it comes out to be way more than $1 million. And I kind of see Bitcoin in the beginning as that penny, but once as it continues adoption and continues its time existing, it increasingly gets higher and higher adoption.
Right.
The more it exists.
Just drives more adoption. Yeah, that was a great analogy. I mean, and it's true, like, if you have that concept or idea, right, and it's in its sort of like infant stages, I guess you would say Bitcoin is, because
infant stages.
Those moments of growth are exponential, right? And then I think, like, I've heard it before, I don't know where from, but someone said, like, one of humanity's greatest failings is, like, understanding exponential growth or something like that. Like, they can't, it's difficult for humans to even envision exponential growth until it happens, right? So, like, look at the coronavirus pandemic. That's a good example, right? Exponential growth of infectious, like, however you feel about it, there are people getting infected, even if you think it's not a bad infection, or, you know, I'm not going to get into it. But
it still exists.
Right, so it exists, and look at the exponential effect of things, right? It's difficult for humans, I think, not in regard to coronavirus specifically, but in terms of exponential value, I think it's difficult for humans to conceptualize what that looks like, right? And so, like, I think that super applies to Bitcoin, because it's difficult for people to even imagine, like when I tell people my thoughts about Bitcoin, they're like, no way, it can't be that powerful, you know? And it's like, people were saying the same thing about the internet, you know, in the 80s. They were like, oh, you know, it's never going to replace my phone, you know, my phone line. It's never going to replace my television. It's never going to replace blah. And it did replace all of those things, because people don't understand exponential effects, you know?
Yeah, and honestly, only recently did it start to replace the television.
Right, it's a recent revolution.
I mean, I remember as a kid, you know, which is really not too long ago, but I remember when I was a kid, you know, we would have cable, but, you know, about 5 years ago, we're just like, wait a minute, like, we have the internet. And that has infinite more entertainment than cable does.
Right, yeah, like, and I think almost every family has come to that same conclusion, right? If it's not in one form of that, it's another, where they've just digitized what they previously had in, like, a sort of non-digital form, right? Like, and so if you can imagine, like, that applied to, like, money, you have Bitcoin, because it's taking, like, all of these outside realms out of your control, right? Like things like the money markets and stuff, like the manipulation that the currency bankers do and shit. It's like taking all of those aspects and digitizing them into the freedom of the internet, right? In the same way that internet did that to communication, it's like happening to money. And so, like, I think, it's just like people underestimated and misunderstood, really. I think that's a better word, is misunderstand. People misunderstand Bitcoin, and then that's how they kind of underestimate it at the same time, you know?
Yeah, something that really pisses me off, and, you know, really I think people should change their outlook on it, is, like, the price being a number. And, you know, they look at $30,000 pretty much is what we're at right now.
Yeah.
And they think, wow, $30,000. Like, it's almost, it's because, I feel like it's because of any other, asset or, you know, stock or whatever.
Yeah, thing.
It's not valued that high because they don't let it do that, because then it would be unattractive to investors.
Right,
but,
so they just, like, inflate the supply.
Yeah, they either inflate the supply or they do, you know, like a stock split or whatever. But Bitcoin can't do that. So, and that's a good thing, really, because you could, the number could be anything it wants to be.
Yeah, the number's irrelevant.
Yeah, the price doesn't really matter. It's just a number.
Because one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin, you know?
Right.
And so the market just does, like, the discovery of what that price should really mean.
Yeah. There's, like, numbers go to infinity, so, you know, Bitcoin could go to as high as it really wanted to. Right, it's just whatever, if the market placed the price of Bitcoin there, that's what it is. Exactly.
And it's funny.
What's that Go ahead and say that while I look this up. I'm looking up somewhere.
I was gonna say it's funny because I was talking about this on Twitter a little while ago, but like the price of things are kind of skewed now, and I think Saifedean mentioned this. I think I learned this from his book, and it was something about how everything now is, and probably a little bit of Michael Saylor. They both say everything's skewed by inflation, right? All the markets, everything is either priced incorrectly, right? Overinflated, or there's a mismatch between the actual value of products and their pricing, right? Like homes shouldn't be worth, millions of dollars in regular, Chicago suburbs, Los Angeles suburbs, San Francisco suburbs, everywhere. You've got these regular single family homes for $1.5 million or $2 million. That's not regular. It should be less. Yeah. And it's a result of hyperinflation, right? And so I just think like price is so irrelevant now. Like I said, someone on Twitter said like, no, for Bitcoin dollar sat parity to happen, a quadrillion dollars would have to be the value of the world or something like that. That was their comment. And I was like, well,
what would the price of Bitcoin be if one sat was $1?
The price would be 100 million. And then the person commented, the global wealth would have to be 2.2 quadrillion dollars, he said, for Bitcoin to be worth that much, right? And to him that was impossible. And to me it's not, because a quadrillion is subjective, right? If the Fed prints, 999 million trillions, right, they're going to get to a quadrillion. And I'm not saying like they're going to, but like it's all subjective in terms of numbers, right?
Right. Just like how $1 trillion was crazy 20 years ago, like it's the same thing. Like back in the day, $1 billion is the new million, and $1 trillion is the new billion. It keeps on going.
Right. And if we're talking about like things like what's going to happen after the coronavirus with the universal basic income stuff that I guarantee is going to start happening, the inflation is going to go off the walls, and people are going to be facing, have you ever seen the Zimbabwean $1 billion bill? That's like what we're going to be facing, is $1 million bills, and quadrillion's not far off from that.
Yeah, exactly. Going back to that thing I was looking up the Berkshire Hathaway, the Class A stock, the one.
Beautiful. Didn't Bitcoin take over market cap of Berkshire just a little while ago?
I think it is almost there, but it's like number 13.
No, I could have swore I thought I tagged Warren on it. Let's see.
Anyway, yeah, of course, tagged with the old Warren Buffett. But
go
anyway,
ahead.
The Class A stock. There's a Class B one, but I think I'm not too familiar with the stock market because it doesn't matter. But
yeah,
I think the Class A one, they have more say in decisions or something like that. But anyway, one share of that costs $347,000.
Jeez.
So why can't Bitcoin be valued? It's just a number.
Yeah.
Like, it exists. Like a stock exists that is that price. So
yeah. So
valued then?
According to this Yahoo Finance article, the Bitcoin price needs to pass $28,827 to beat Berkshire Hathaway, and we are at $29,371. So take it, Warren. Take it.
You know what I don't like about the stock market is it's like, okay, great, the stock is priced at this or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But what I want to know immediately is how many shares exist out there. Yet that's not like something they tell you. Like, yeah, I think they do have that information out there, but it's like it's not one of the first things that they share with you. It's like unimportant, but really it is important because, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm just looking at it through too much of a Bitcoin perspective. But.
Right. It's just the natural perspective of Bitcoin. Stock market's interesting because it's if we actually existed like in a in a really productive society, it would be really like beneficial, right? Like people could invest their money into actual companies that would exist in their lives. Like isn't it interesting that you can purchase like Apple stock and then that would like further the research that goes into your own iPhone, right? Like that's a good idea. What's happened is it's been like poisoned, right, by the fiat spigots, right? The spigots spewing the fiat money all over the ground, right? And what happens is all these, like, so you just said Berkshire is worth what, 340,000? Is that what you said? Something like that. I remember like back in April or something, I think it was worth like 100. It was worth less, and all the stocks, I mean, record highs, you know. So all the stocks were worth a lot less a while ago. And think about like the economic conditions of like unemployment right now, the inflation rate, obviously, the actual skeletal structure of like the service industry and stuff like that, like hotels and restaurants. If you look at all that, there shouldn't be, stock all-time highs, but there is, and it's because of things like federal purchasing of securities, right, and stock buybacks and other things that are going on through the Federal Reserve and their games, right? And
right.
So I think the stock market itself is a good idea. I think it's a really big shame that it's all valued in such a shitty currency.
Yeah, I don't partake in the stock market.
Yeah,
less than 1% of my portfolio is in the stock market.
Right, and
actually, probably about 2%.
2%. Got to be honest. So yeah, so just going back to the inevitability of hyperbitcoinization, I think we really got to touch on a lot of the things that are gonna lead that way, right? Like, just the network effects. We talked about that. We talked about how numbers, like price, as far as like value and all that, is kind of skewed. And we talked about the stock market and how that is kind of failing, and how inevitably that will capitulate to Bitcoin just out of the fact that the stock market is all in US dollars. I mean, it's all related, right? Like anything that's not Bitcoin right now is going to have to find its position below Bitcoin at some point, you know?
Yeah, isn't the I'm not 100% sure on this, but isn't the stock market down since like 1970 if it's priced in gold?
I actually don't know that. That's an interesting statistic.
I'm gonna look up S&P 500 gold.
I know one metric that Michael Saylor points out is the whole how many hours it takes to buy, how many hours on minimum wage it takes to buy one share of the S&P 500, and that has I think he said the hours have gone up significantly because and what that signifies is, if we think about it, minimum wage isn't keeping up with what the stock market values the economy at, right?
Exactly.
And,
they just think about it. They just printed 22% of all of the US dollar this year, but yet the minimum wage is like pretty much the same. Like, that doesn't really make any sense.
It's all getting pumped into the securities markets. It's all getting pumped into the bonds. It's all getting pumped into just finances, and it's the same thing as 2008, right? And I think about this, right? Think about how funny it is that 2008, the year that Satoshi really kind of came up with the whole Bitcoin. Well, he didn't come up with it that year necessarily, but released it and all that. The same thing, the same time was happening, the subprime mortgage crisis and the whole crash in the markets and everything.
I'm honestly not too familiar with the exact timeline.
Right.
But
was the timeline suggesting that it was an immediate reaction towards the housing crisis, or was it just kind of a coincidence?
Bitcoin or
I feel
just
like
or just
Bitcoin existing.
yeah,
because-
yeah. I that's what I was getting at. I think I wouldn't say it was a direct reaction, because obviously people have been working on like the whole crypto hash thing for a long time, but
Right.
I think it just was like meant to be like destiny, you know, that one of the greatest financial crashes of all time would happen on the same point that really the solution to that financial crash was created, right? And like I think like if we had had the 2008 crash and Bitcoin had been around for 10 years, right? By now we would have already had hyperbitcoinization. But now
Right.
it's 2021. We had the crash of 2020, the recovery, and what I believe to be is a soon-to-come subsequent crash. And I believe that this time around it's going to be different, because we have had Bitcoin for 10 years, more than 10 years. The groundwork has been laid, right? And now it's really a straight path forward to hyper-Bitcoinization, right? Like the
Right.
macro fundamentals are pointing in the direction of safe haven store of value in a digitally secured asset with an immutable ledger. And people who don't understand that are going to lose all their money. And there's nothing that we can do about that, not because we don't want to, but because the federal government is in charge of all this, and they're the ones who are making it happen.
But with Bitcoin, you're in charge of yourself.
Yeah. So
Very
yeah.
interesting how it's almost shocking that I guess we're just too early, because it's almost shocking how people haven't realized this yet.
Yeah, I was just saying earlier today to someone, we're not early adopters. The early adopters are going to be the people buying in a couple years, when Bitcoin is still under, a couple million. Well, if Bitcoin's under $1 million, you're an early adopter,
Yeah.
We're the hyper
I'm
freaks.
lost right now.
Yeah, we're the people who are eccentric and out there, because it's very much like using a computer in the 80s in your garage, it's just not common yet, and once it will become common, I think it's going to be funny to look back. I think historically it will be funny to look back,
Yeah.
My perspective on Bitcoin is one that it would be such a tremendous revolution in the world that everyone will know about it, and everyone's going to like look back at the history of it very particularly because of how big of a change it will bring,
Yeah, everyone's gonna recall Bitcoin is brought up so unfrequently that people recall when it is brought up. So, for example, let's say you tell your friend about it. It's brought up so unfrequently that in 10 years from now, he could probably still think back, oh my god, I remember when this person was telling me about it, because that's one of his only experiences talking about it, because it's not talked about enough.
Yeah, like just how we have people who can say like, oh, I remember and these are very select people because it was a small thing at the time, obviously. But we have people who can say like, oh, I remember when the first internet messages were sent, or the first emails were sent,
Yeah.
We'll have the same exact things where Bitcoin will be kind of like this mythological thing that just kind of grew out of nothing. And I think so the internet, right, had this beautiful age between 2000, even earlier, from 1990 all the way until 2010, where it was just this Wild West, where everything could happen, and the domains were all out there, and just everything was kind of open and free, right? And it just felt much more less controlled, right? And less centralized, really, is what it was. I mean, right now the internet is centralized around social media and all that, and that's why it feels centralized. But back when everything was forums and open source and all that kind of stuff, that period, right, if we consider that like the golden age of the internet, I think we're going to experience that with Bitcoin, right? We haven't even hit that. Like, we've had the first 10 years, but that would be like comparing the first 10 years of the internet to the first 10 years of Bitcoin. Like, the first 10 years of the internet were kind of trash because it wasn't really like, it hadn't flourished. It hadn't really like gained traction. So if we can imagine that, if we can imagine the next 20 years of the internet after the first 10, right? Imagine just how wild the next 20 years of Bitcoin is going to be, right? Like, oh my gosh, like, can't even freaking describe it.
I have a feeling that the growth of Bitcoin is going to be a lot more rapid than the growth of the internet.
Right. Isn't that a freaking crazy thing to say? Because, like, everyone talks, like, when people say, like, use examples, right? The internet's all, people reference, quote unquote, the internet.
Very good example.
Right. They're like, oh, look at, quote unquote, the internet. The internet. Oh, the internet. Like, that's a thing, you know, to reference the internet because the internet was so revolutionary, right? Kind of like the book. I bet people used to say that, like, oh, think about the book. Imagine before the book. Like, so the internet was was the next thing that, like, really changed everything. So, what's it called? Like, I think Bitcoin, like you said, it's going to be so unimaginably big and fast that it will overtake even the internet.
Yeah, I'm very glad that I'm aware of Bitcoin.
Are you bullish?
Some would say I'm bullish.
Oh boy.
I've gotten a few of my family members to start DCAing
Really?
a month ago. So
Did you sign them up on your Swan Bitcoin link?
actually, I had them buy XRP.
And don't even joke. Don't even bring that name in the conversation.
Yeah,
Speaking of XRP, just to touch on it real quick, isn't that interesting? I mean,
it's funny because it just proves like Bitcoin's point even further of that can't happen to Bitcoin.
no,
Like,
seriously, it cannot.
I'm sure you got your I was about to say a bad word there, but let's just say your lower intelligent people. They could, I could see someone thinking right now, oh my God, XRP's getting sued, whatever. This is gonna happen to Bitcoin too. It's like, oh my God, if that even crosses your mind, you're not even thinking about it correctly.
Yeah.
And you need to definitely rethink.
Yeah, like, and it's funny, you made money off the 2017 pump and dump from XRP, and I just think it really just goes to show, yeah, like you said, it just has to show that Bitcoin is the one that cannot have anything done to it, Who are you going to sue for Bitcoin, Satoshi? It's just ridiculous. And
I remember a specific moment that it was like one of my first times like putting a large like sum of money. I think, I was like, I was a minor at the time, so I think I had like a few shares of Visa because that was my mom's favorite stock. Because it just always goes up.
Yeah, number go up.
I was just, I was a minor, so I was a little bit less intelligent as I am nowadays.
Mm-hmm, I'm sure.
I remember selling my Visa stock to buy Bitcoin, which is a very great idea.
Oh yeah.
And I remember like on Coinbase, I could buy Bitcoin Cash, I could buy Ethereum or Bitcoin. And I remember thinking like, which one do I buy? Like, and I was aware of Bitcoin's superiority at the time, but I remember asking my parents, I was like, which one should I buy? Like, and then one of my family members just said, just buy Bitcoin. It's like the main one. I was like, oh yeah, I'll just do that.
Yeah.
It's the simplest answer that is the
just
greatest.
buy Bitcoin, guys. Just buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, just buy it. Not financial advice.
Not financial advice, but just buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, just
Yeah. Well,
Well, I think that will wrap it up for today's episode.
yeah, thank you all for listening, if you're still listening.
And if you're listening, if you're hearing this right now, and you comment your BTC address, you'll get 10,000 Satoshis. So,
Seriously. Legit.
yeah, legitimately. First to comment their address gets 10,000 Satoshis.
All right. We're going to send it off on that.